The cruiser Vithari's Mercy did not enter the system quietly. It tore into the dark like a blade through ancient cloth, its hull reverberating with the groans of a space-time fabric that clearly resented being breached. The ship, a Thoraxian, war relic reinforced with living bioalloy and pulse-reactive quantum shielding, shimmered with the dim glow of adaptive camouflage, though no stealth field could hide the unnatural unease that swept over its crew the moment they crossed into the HD 18973-3B system. The region had been dead for over 30,000 cycles. No comms, no trade lanes. Not even scavenger drones dared enter. It was the last known coordinate of a vanished species worshipped in hushed tones by fringe cults and ancient knowledge seekers across the galaxy, the Ancients. The mythic ones who came before even the Therax Dominion's own storied rise. And now, the most elite exploratory war cruiser in the Dominion had arrived at their doorstep, summoned by coordinates etched into an obsidian fragment recovered from the derelict remains of the Gorlak Sigma Shrine World, coordinates that hadn't existed on any known star map for millennia, until now. Commander Zalreth paced inside his command pod, tendrils twitching nervously beneath his battle carapace. His race had ruled 2 quadrants of the spiral arm for over 10,000 cycles, and yet he felt small now, insignificant. The stars themselves looked wrong here, bent, stretched, watching. The AI core, VHO-7, began to stutter, displaying glyphs from forgotten languages and muttering corrupted coordinates from systems long since collapsed into neutron dust. The crew was already on edge. First came the gravitational distortions, eddies, in space-time that twisted navigational data. Then, strange pulses on the psychic spectrum, almost like distant screams echoing across a cosmic canyon. Some of the more sensitive crew members began to hear whispers, not auditory, not even telepathic, something deeper, something primordial, and then they saw it. Suspended in low orbit over the shattered third planet was a structure, not a station, not a ship, a monument, larger than the moons that orbited it. Blacker than any known matter, its spires twisted into impossible geometries. No weld marks, no seams. It hadn't been constructed, it had grown. Like a wound in reality, it hovered with slow, menacing grace, pulsing with glyphs of luminous decay. "Bring it on screen," Zalreth ordered, his voice steady, though every muscle in his body screamed to retreat. The main view screen shifted, and for the first time in his command, Zalreth felt fear in his soul core. Deep within the largest spire of the structure, carved into ancient carbon-fused alloy, were human letters. English, primitive, ancient Earth English, worn but unmistakable. We warned them not to follow. Too late now. The silence on the bridge was absolute. Technician Arala, usually sharp-tongued and dryly cynical, simply stood motionless, her compound eyes wide with unblinking terror. Her translator implant didn't even activate. No one needed translation. The message bypassed language. It spoke, not to their minds, but to the primal memory buried in all sentient beings. It felt like a warning meant for everything that lived. "Impossible," whispered Arla. "That language hasn't been spoken outside fringe anthropological archives in over 25,000 cycles, and Earth, Terra, was deemed an extinct biosphere long before the Ascendant War." Zalreth leaned closer to the glyphs on the screen. He noticed now, there were more carvings. Dozens of them, spiraling deeper into the structure like some vast record etched into the bones of a god. Names, dates, coordinates, all in dead languages, but all eerily familiar. Each name matched legends, heroes, tyrants, gods. But they weren't myths, they were humans. And the dates? They spanned millions of years, not thousands, not cycles, millions. Zalreth's blood ran cold. "We thought they were a primitive root race," he muttered, barely audible. "A dead civilization that collapsed before achieving galactic prominence." Arala turned toward him, her expression haunted. "They weren't primitive. They were first. All of us. Every species in the Accord. We thought we discovered FTL, mastered quantum manipulation, ascended through science and war." She turned her gaze back to the screen. "But we're walking paths they laid out. We're climbing ruins they left behind." A new alarm shrieked to life across the bridge. A pulse. Not a weapon. A signal. Faint at first, then rising, surging through the EM bands like a heart restarting. The spires began to shimmer. All across the surface of the structure, lines of molten red emerged, pulsing like veins awakening from an eon-long sleep. The message changed. Repeated. Too late now. Commander, one of the junior officers croaked, voice ragged with disbelief. We're detecting activation sequences from the planetary surface, and not just there, beneath the crust. There are structures everywhere. Entire cities buried in layers of time. But that's not the worst part. He gulped. Sir, some of those structures are shaped like Dominion war cradles. Our war cradles, but older. Millions of cycles older. Zalreth stared at the display, his mandibles frozen. The implications slammed into him like a gravity wave. They had not discovered their own technology. They had reawakened it. The Dominion, the Veldari Ascendancy, the Irix-born hive, every species who thought themselves pioneers of galactic might, had only uncovered pieces, remnants. They hadn't invented FTL, they'd rediscovered it. They hadn't forged empires from nothing. They'd built atop the bones of titans, human titans. The gravity aboard the ship shifted ever so slightly. From the windowed port, a colossal figure was rising from the planet's fractured surface. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't even alive in the traditional sense. It radiated entropy and memory. A humanoid shape, draped in a cloak of nebular filaments, stepped from a broken continent as if brushing off a long nap. Its eyes were stars, twin orbs of white-hot singularity energy. In its hand, it held a staff forged from a collapsed neutron sun. VHO-7 broke protocol and spoke without prompt warning. Pattern match. 98.76% correlation to pre-collapse human neural signatures. Entity classification. Prime architect. The bridge went dark. The view screen shattered. And through the electromagnetic fog, they all heard it. Spoken in 1,000 languages simultaneously, in tones that echoed not through sound, but through the bones of reality. Return to your stars. You are echoes of what was. You have awakened the silence. You will not like what answers back. Before we jump into this epic tale, subscribe to HFY Nova Chronicles for the most intense sci-fi battles, legendary warriors, and universe-shaking wars. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button and join the fight. Zalreth fell to his knees as the data overwhelmed the ship. His final coherent thought before the pain overtook him wasn't of battle or conquest. It was a question. If humans were the first, what did they become when they left? And more terrifyingly, why did they leave at all? The Dominion cruiser, Vithari's Mercy, drifted in stunned silence, half its systems paralyzed, the rest scrambling to recalibrate against a storm of data pouring in from the artifact world below. In a single sweep, every assumption, every doctrine, every historical record, every species origin myth had been shattered like glass beneath the boot of something far older than anything sentient minds were built to comprehend. Commander. Zalreth stared blankly as the recovered telemetry projected impossible information onto the cracked command console. The humanoid figure, now labeled by the AI as a prime architect, had vanished, dematerializing into particulate subquanta that slipped through shields and sensors like cosmic smoke. No trace, no residual radiation, just one undeniable truth pulsing across the quantum relay. They had been watching all along. Deep beneath the planetary surface, the awakening continued. Massive vaults, each stretching across hundreds of kilometers, cracked open with seismic shutters. Inside lay things not born of evolution or fabrication, but of intent. Structures of such mathematical perfection, they resonated harmonic frequencies. Naturally, buildings tuned to the vibration of spacetime itself. Their architecture bore uncanny similarities to modern Veldari memory cathedrals and Therax military command nests. Yet these were infinitely more advanced, constructed from impossible alloys with isotope ratios that should not exist in this galaxy. Arala, her expression distant, fingers shaking, traced the contours of a holographic schematic projected from one of the deep vaults. Look at these energy signatures. Some of these power cores are stable at temperatures exceeding 1700 Fahrenheit. Their fusion control isn't even magnetic, it's gravitic. They're binding plasma with manipulated micro-singularities. This isn't a lost civilization. This is a species that ascended. Zalreth turned, jaw tightening. Then why hide it? Why bury it beneath a planet, shielded behind collapsed star corridors and erased from all known astronavigation? She shook her head. I don't think they buried it. She looked him in the eye, voice now trembling with awe. I think they left it behind on purpose, as a message, a test. As if answering her unspoken thought, a low hum vibrated through the ship, felt more in bone than ear. The ship's grav stabilizers adjusted, confused. Outside, stars began to dim unnaturally, as if shying away from the system itself. The artifact world's moon suddenly cracked in half like brittle glass, revealing not molten core, but machinery. Entire complexes embedded within, forming what could only be described as a cosmic observatory. Without permission, without interface, without conduit. It slammed into every cognitive species aboard like an ocean through a cracked dam. Visions, memories. Not theirs, but older. Someone else's. Human. Zalreth blinked, only to find himself standing on a red plain under twin suns. Around him, towering structures rose, not of steel or crystal, but of pure computational light. Humanity walked among them, clothed in suits of phase thread and reality cloth. They bent space-time with gestures, whispered to distant galaxies with thought, and they were not alone. Other species surrounded them, proto-Thoraxians, early Veldari, even hive-form Irixborn, all in early primitive forms. And the humans? They were teaching them, lifting them. Not conquerors, but mentors, stewards. Then, catastrophe. A vision of war unlike anything ever recorded. A rift in the very framework of the observable universe. Not against another species, but against something else entirely. A force not of flesh, not even of sentient machine, but of pure entropy. It had no name, only a shape. A massive, hollow sphere eating the stars from within, devouring entire timelines like breath in cold air. And in response, the humans had left. Not retreated. Not lost. Left. They had chosen to exit the physical universe entirely. Last act of desperate wisdom. The artifact was not a ruin, it was a gate, and now, the gate was waking up again. Back on the bridge, crew collapsed to their knees as the visions ended. Some screamed, others wept. Zalreth steadied himself, breath. Ragged. He had seen the truth. Humanity had not died. They had transcended. Every great scientific breakthrough in Dominion history. Every marvel of Irixborn biosymbiosis. Every Veldari jump gate. It all came from shadows cast by the human's light. Dim echoes of an age forgotten. Commander, Arla said quietly. There's something else. From the moon. It's projecting a language construct. A hologram flickered into being at the center of the bridge. A human, tall, weathered, eyes alight with stars. His presence carried weight, not just metaphorically, but physically. The kind of presence that made you feel gravity differently. He spoke, not with sound, but with meaning. You were not meant to follow, but now you have. You do not yet understand. The cost. A pause. The stars behind him twisted into complex quantum glyphs. Math too advanced for any translation. We were your past, and your potential, but you rushed forward, armed with fragments, thinking yourselves gods. The figure tilted its head slightly, as if studying them with equal awe and disappointment. The gate is open now, and what we held back has heard. You, the hologram dissolved. The moon's fragments shifted again, collapsing into a new shape, an activated signal array, now emitting a pulse of infinite wavelength toward the edge of the known universe. H07 stammered, its voice glitching. Message destination, not locatable. Target system, does not exist in Euclidean spacetime. Estimating contact in 4 cycles. Zalreth swallowed hard. Contact with what? The AI hesitated, then answered. Unknown. Designated. Threat level. Omega. Cross-referenced label from human records. The silence beyond the end. Everyone went quiet, because now, it wasn't just about humans. Now, something else was coming. And it had been waiting for someone to open the door. The pulse had gone out like a shockwave through the bones of the universe. An interdimensional signal older than memory, encoded in physics itself. Where it passed, stars dimmed, not as if blocked, but as if something in them withdrew, the light retreating, as though life itself recognized the call and recoiled in ancient terror. On board Vithari's Mercy, the silence after that pulse was worse than any alarm. The crew moved like ghosts. Commander Zalreth convened an emergency war council in the Sanctum Core, an armored sphere within the cruiser's hull, shielded from all known psychic interference and temporal bleed. Yet even there, the air felt heavy, as though space had grown denser. Time slower. The kind of weight one feels in dreams, just before the fall. "We're no longer alone in this system," said Arala, projecting data into the chamber. 12 vessels just emerged from deep cloaking above the ecliptic. Not ours, not Dominion. They're mixed signature craft. Veldari, Hiveborn, Sarntel, even one Iridari ghost frigate, species that haven't allied in over 3 millennia. And they're hailing. Zalreth watched the transmission open, and the image that filled the air was nothing short of surreal. Representatives of rival empires, some of whom had engaged in full-scale extermination campaigns against one another, not cycles ago, were gathered around a crystalline table, their eyes haunted, their voices grim. "Your signal was felt across 6 sectors," said the Veldari ambassador, her iridescent skin flickering with stress. "It activated dormant constructs buried in our core worlds, constructs bearing human DNA." Another, a hive-born war priest, buzzed low. On Vel-Karun, a monolith opened. Inside, a warning in blood script. "We delayed it once. That debt now comes due. We demand to know, what have you awakened?" Zalreth didn't respond immediately. Instead, he uploaded everything, the scans, the data, the vision they'd all experienced. And as the data transferred, no one spoke. Because no one could. The truth wasn't theoretical anymore. The artifact world below was not just an archaeological marvel or ancient tomb. It was a fail-safe, a quarantine anchor, a node in a containment web strung across galaxies, designed by a civilization far beyond the scale of any modern empire. And now, that containment was broken. As the upload completed, one voice finally broke, the silence. A voice none expected. It came from a corner of the chamber where a figure had remained hidden in a distortion field. As it shimmered away, the gathered leaders tensed. It was a human. No, not quite. She was taller than normal humans, from recovered records, and her presence exuded gravity, not metaphorically but literally. Instruments in the chamber adjusted subtly, reacting to a localized mass differential. Her skin was marked with shifting fractal patterns, alive with code, quantum glyphs cycling in and out of phase. A preserved remnant, a custodian. "You call yourselves the great powers," she said, her voice like folded metal and song. "You wear crowns built from the bones of the forgotten. You war over echoes. And now, you ask what you've awoken." Her eyes, twin wells of stabilized wormhole matrices, locked on Zalreth. "You've summoned the remainder." The council erupted into confusion, questions, and fear. Zalreth raised a claw, silencing them. "What is the remainder?" he asked, though some dark part of him already knew. The woman, or the being that had once been human, spoke a word in no known language. The translation systems rendered it not into a word but a feeling. Absence. A black void in thought itself. A hole where meaning should be. "It was not a species," she continued. "It was not a force. It was not alive. It was the result. The inevitable shadow cast by intelligent light." She walked slowly toward the holomap of the system, now littered with warning markers. "We named it Silence. We believed we could lock it away. When we left this realm, we tied our containment to your evolution. You were meant to grow slowly, to rediscover only when you were ready, when you had unity, empathy, vision, but you raced, you hungered, you dug. Her voice dropped. And now, the lock has failed. Outside the cruiser, the planet's surface was changing. The vaults, once dormant, were collapsing inward, not in destruction, but in folding. Reality twisted as the planet began to form, into a toroidal singularity, a containment array pulling power from hyperspace itself. And above it, clouds swirled unnaturally as the first signs of non-physical contact began. It didn't arrive with a fleet. It arrived with questions. The first anomaly was a silence field, projected across subspace bands used by all known technologies. Not a jamming signal. A void. Communication didn't just fail, it stopped being possible. VHO-7 began spewing nonsense equations and recursive paradoxes until the AI core was shut down. Sensors picked up spectrums no species had ever encountered. Fields of anti-information, particles that negated the presence of observation. And then came the voice. Not from any one direction, but from within. You speak in time. We are beyond it. You count in light. We are its death. Arala screamed and collapsed, clutching her head. Others followed. Zalreth stumbled to the console, activating emergency psychic dampeners, flooding the ship with null field static. For a moment, silence returned. But the voice had left its mark. They weren't facing a fleet. They weren't preparing for war. They were being erased. Not physically. Not even existentially. Something deeper. Their meaning was unraveling. The human custodian looked to Zalreth one last time. "This is your moment," she said. "To do what we could not. Not to fight. Not to win. But to understand. The only weapon left is unity. Fragmentation is what feeds it." And with that, she dissolved into stardust, returning to whatever fold of reality had preserved her this long. The chamber dimmed. In the silence, a single phrase remained, etched now into every functioning system. On every ship in orbit, there was never a first race, only the first to remember, and the last to forget. Commander Zalreth clenched his jaw. War was pointless now. Empire, meaningless. All that remained was the one truth too many had ignored. They were children playing in a graveyard, and the dead had finally heard them. The stars themselves had begun to change. From the outer rims of known space to the pulsing hearts of ancient empires, subtle shifts were recorded in the stellar lattice. Variable stars blinked out of sequence, pulsars echoed in reverse. The cosmic, microwave background, once a static murmur of the Big Bang, now whispered in patterns. A language of absence, spreading slowly, inescapably. In the Dominion's capital, entire thought clusters went silent. In Veldari high space, a ringworld of scholars fell into madness. Every quantum archive overwritten with a single phrase, "You forgot your place." And above the artifact world, no longer a planet but an impossible structure of orbiting singularities. And living computation, the gathered fleet watched as the laws of nature bent, ever so slightly, out of true. The anomaly was not just coming, it was arriving. From within a fold in space-time, not a ship, but a shadow emerged. Geometries so vast, they defied cognition, perspectives so alien they caused nausea in even the AI constructs. It didn't shimmer or burn, it simply was. A shape of no light, devouring concept, existing in opposition to presence. No weapon locked onto it. No scan returned data. Not because of stealth, but because the very act of trying to observe erased the observer. And yet, it did not attack. It watched. That was worse. Inside Vithari's mercy, Zalreth moved like a being underwater. His mind was fraying at the edges, the grip of his species' logic unraveling as the entity's presence bled across probability itself. He understood now why the humans had left, not out of cowardice, but strategy. You could not fight this. You could only delay it, hide from it, outthink it. A low rumble shook the hull, not impact but resonance. The containment array, built by the prime architects, had stabilized the anomaly's interface with local space. The gate was still functional. Barely. And now, a message pulsed from its heart. Not encoded. Not in words. In feeling. Hope. Arala. pale and silent since the voice's invasion, sat up slowly in her med couch. Her eyes burned with golden filaments, the last residue of contact with the human custodian. The gate. It's still linked, not to another star, to another domain, beyond this dimension, a fail-safe retreat network, but only for those who understand. Zalreth stepped forward. Understand what? She turned to him, and her voice no longer sounded entirely her own. The cost of being alive. Across the fleet, discussions turned into desperate debates. Some demanded retreat, scatter into deep space and hope the entity's focus remained localized. Others insisted on worship, submission, believing the anomaly to be a higher form of cosmic intelligence. A few argued for annihilation, destroy the artifact, collapse the system into a black hole, and take the threat with them. But one voice rose above all. High Matron Kasivari of the Hive-born Collective, ancient and once feared across 16 sectors, spoke with rare clarity. No, she said. We stand. We do not kneel to shadows. Not again. Her statement became the pivot. A multi-species accord was formed, not a treaty, but a pact forged in the fire of extinction. The fleet redirected its weapon systems, not toward the entity, but toward the field of influence it exerted. High-density, graviton lances, chronoton inversion cannons, and phase dispersal mines were arrayed not to kill, but to contain, to trap its attention in a calculated loop of reactive probability. The idea was mad, so mad it might just work. A battle was planned, not against flesh or metal, but against a concept, using misdirection, quantum interference, and harmonic dissonance to confuse the entity's sense of presence. While it watched one point of the board, they would move elsewhere, specifically to the gate. Time fractured as the fleet moved. Weapon discharges rippled in silence. Ships blinked in and out of phase to confuse prediction. One Dominion battlecruiser sacrificed itself by warping inside out, releasing a burst of anti-causality that scrambled local spacetime for 7 seconds. 7 seconds. That was the window. Zalreth and Arala, aboard a specially modified scout vessel, dove toward the heart of the gate. As they descended into the fractal vaults of the artifact, reality twisted around them. Walls grew taller as they approached. Words appeared in reverse before they were spoken, and gravity felt like a question no one was answering correctly. But at the core, they found it. The control interface was not a terminal. It was a mirror. In it, they did not see themselves. They saw what humanity had been and what it had chosen to become. A race that had not conquered others but curated the future. A race that had refused to let the universe break itself. That had chosen, in its final moment, not to die, but to leave a path. Arala stepped forward, tears in her eyes. This isn't just a gate. It's a memory seed. It rewrites reality, through belief, through unity. We don't activate it with commands. We activate it by becoming worthy of it. She extended her hand. The mirror flared with white fire. Across the fleet, systems synchronized. Empires once divided by genocide now moved in harmony. A Veldari tactician calculated the exact pitch for a resonance loop. A Hive-born sacrificed its queen mind to link thousands in cooperative intent. The Iridari ghost frigate, long thought lost, transmitted a harmonic key composed of extinct frequency primes, and the gate opened, not in space, but in meaning. A corridor of folded time, invisible to any instrument, formed around the fleet's command core. The presence recoiled, not in fear, but in recognition. It had seen this once before, and lost. The mirror shuddered, and from within came a voice, not a warning, but a farewell. You who remain, remember. Then, the artifact collapsed into a singular point of golden light and exploded, not outward, but inward, folding itself, the fleet, the gate, and the very threat back into the higher domain where the last of the true humans had vanished eons ago. For a moment, there was only silence. Real silence, not absence, not threat, just peace. But far across the galaxy, in a quiet corner of space untouched by the war, a child looked up at a flickering star. It pulsed once, twice, and whispered, the gate still listens. And it remembers who opened it. In the stillness that followed, the galaxy held its breath. Across 17 sectors, sensors failed to register the coordinates once known as VHO7. Star maps showed an absence where once the artifact world stood. No gravitational signature, no debris field, no trace of what had occurred. But the silence it left behind was different. Not the smothering void of the entity, but the calm left in the wake of a storm that finally passed. A silence that said, "It is done," but the stars remembered, and so did those who survived. Commander Zalreth awoke in a place that was not a place. He stood on a plateau beneath a sky that shimmered like flowing crystal, stars drifting like pollen in slow-motion winds. It took him a moment to realize he was not breathing, and did not need to. Arella stood beside him, her eyes filled with awe. They were not dead. They were not alive. They were between. The corridor opened by the gate had not been a weapon. It had been a bridge, and where it led was a space beyond conflict, beyond entropy. They stood in a sanctuary constructed not from metal or stone, but from pure encoded intent, what the ancients might have called spirit. Around them, titanic structures rotated slowly in multidimensional spirals, each one whispering fragments of human thought, sacrifice, purpose, vigilance, memory. They had found the refuge, but it was empty. No cities, no crowds, no divine architects, standing watch. Just echoes. And then, in the center of the impossible horizon, a monument. It rose like a shard of frozen flame, etched in every language of every species humanity had ever encountered. Zalreth stepped closer, and the surface responded, revealing a glowing inscription. A final message not for them, but for everyone who would ever find it. We were never gods. We were never saviors. We were only witnesses. And when the shadow came, we chose to hold the line. Remember us not as the first. Remember us as the ones who stood. As they read, images filled the sky. Fragments of a legacy buried by time. Earth, shining blue and fragile. Colonies blooming among the moons of gas giants. Artificial stars igniting with human signatures encoded in their light. A million voices across a million years whispering stories, songs, names. The record of a species that had grown from fragility into stewardship, not through dominance, but understanding. Humanity had not vanished. It had ascended, or perhaps escaped. Not into divinity, but into guardianship, weaving itself into the very lattice of space-time. The quarantine vault had not simply sealed the threat. It had rewritten the rules of how it could be fought. Humanity became the firewall, the key, and the whispering voice that had guided the fleet, the warnings encoded into the stars, the consciousness embedded in the gate. They had all been echoes of those who stayed behind, not to be remembered, but to remind. Back in real space, the galaxy stirred. The survivors of the fleet, those who had not crossed into the corridor, returned changed. Some believed they had failed. Others called it a miracle. Many could not even speak of what had transpired, as if their memories were sealed in layers of metaphor, unable to surface without unraveling sanity itself. But all agreed on one truth. Something ancient had ended, and something older had begun. The empires, for the first time in their recorded histories, called for a conclave, not to claim territory, but to build memory. A coalition of preservation was formed, not an alliance of war, but of warning. Across the stars, monoliths were raised, each a retelling of the war against the remainder, each inscribed with the symbols of unity that had birthed the final stand. Children would grow up learning of humanity not as myth, but as the first stewards. Not gods, not tyrants, but witnesses. Architects of a gate that opened only when all others had failed. Across the great libraries of the Veldari, new disciplines emerged. Chronoanthropology, interdimensional ethics, fractal memory studies, all dedicated to deciphering the traces left behind by the ancient human race. And in the deepest parts of the void, travelers sometimes reported anomalies, fleeting visions of impossible structures, glimpses of worlds that existed half a second, ahead of time, or echoes of voices offering a single word, ready. None could explain them. None could prove they were real. But all who heard them felt the same thing. That the gate was not a prison. It was a promise. And it would open again when needed. High Matron Casavari stepped down from her position, choosing to spend her remaining cycles not in command, but in teaching. Her final speech was recorded across over 100 star systems. She said, "We thought ourselves the apex, the inheritors of the stars, but we were seeds planted in the shadow of giants, and they did not crush us. They waited for us to remember who we were meant to become. And so the galaxy moved forward, not in triumph, but in vigilance, in reverence, in hope. Because somewhere beyond time, beyond fear, beyond even the death of meaning itself, the last remnant of humanity still watched, not to rule, not to return, but to ensure that none would face the silence alone again."